What is up again, everybody? I'm Clayton. Welcome back to Ages of Film. We got another live stream Sunday, and we are reviving, picking up a series we started last summer, I believe, of a concept I had in mind, original versus remake horror series, where we kind of just look at, evaluate original horror films with their remake and talk about what we like about them, what we don't like about them, which one we think was better, and just have fun with it. But I did my last one with my good friend Jack Petrie, so we're bringing him back on, and it's going to be me and Jack for all these. We've got a couple actually lined up this year, so this should be fun. And Jack, thanks for coming on and doing this with me, brother.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back. It's going to be good fun.
Yeah.
I know you and I, when we get chatting about a film, we have a habit of going on for a long while.
Yeah.
So we'll be getting into the detail.
We do, yeah. I feel like, but I mean, it's good to do this with someone that you have good chemistry with, and someone that you watch some. I don't know about you, but you can watch like some podcast or streams like this, and two people that don't know each other that well, and they come on, it's like they
Yeah,
just don't vibe very very well together. So
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, because if it feels like it's more interviewing and they're just sort of asking them information, it's not like a chat between
right,
mates. It's a very
right.
different thing. And like when you're listening to it, you want it to sound like nice, casual, fun
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, yeah. And as an audience member, you want to feel almost like you're there and can engage, directly with the
Absolutely.
people as well. Speaking of audience, I know we got some people in the chat right now. With Russell Dorsey showing up. What's up, Clayton, and everyone in the chat? Let's smash the like button if you haven't already. Let's get this party started. This is interesting. Yes, thank you, Russell, for that. Do hit the like button and subscribe. Also check out Jack's channel if you haven't. Show him some love, sub, like, the deal. He's got some good stuff over there. Got a new setup going on as well. So yeah, go show Jack some love. We got Jerry Wilson, my mod in the house. What's up, Clayton? What is up, Jerry? Glad you could make it, brother. Thanks for being here. And yeah, so we got Backtrack Cinema, Jason dropping in. Everyone hit that like button and subscribe to these awesome channels. Thank you for that, Jason. Thanks for dropping in, man. Dom is in the house saying, hey, what's up, Dom? Glad you could make it, man. Yeah, so this should be fun, guys. We're gonna talk Invasion of the Body Snatchers, original versus remake. So 1956 was the original. It was directed by Don Siegel, and the remake 1978 was directed by Philip Kaufman. So those are the two films we're going to talk about. And guys, while Jack and I are talking about these, let us know your thoughts in the comment section too. What you guys think of these two movies? Which one do you like? Do you guys like better? Which one did you see first? All that stuff. We love to engage with you guys and make you guys every bit as much a part of this conversation as Jack and I are. So I do have a couple facts here pulled up. So the budget for the original 1956, the budget at the time was $417,000. If you do the adjust or the adjust to modern day budget money wise, yeah, it would be equivalent to about $4.8 million budget. That's kind of where we're think of that when we're thinking about budget for this movie. 1978 budget, 3.5 million at the time. Adjusted comes to roughly 18 million. So a pretty good, decent budget there for
They must have had faith in that original from the start then, putting that kind of money in back then for.
Yeah.
I mean, was it whether it was an original idea or whether it was taken from a story and whatnot, but to kind of put the money into a film adaptation that is like, you don't know whether it's going to work. That's actually a lot of money in the 50s for horror,
It really is. Yeah. I mean, 4.8, I mean, that's a decent horror film by most decade standards,
Yeah.
And then the remake at 18 million. I mean, they must have had a lot of confidence, that they were going to pull off that remake really well.
So even now, a lot of horror films get like a 10 to 15 million budget, and
Right.
that's considered like a proper. You're not an independent. That's like an actual studio film, isn't it, for horror? So
Right.
even by now, it's proper. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's and interesting. I always like looking at the budgets of these horror movies to see what they were doing. You know how they pulled it off with the budget that they had. I think it also puts context in perspective with movies. You know, like a movie that only has a couple $100,000 budget, obviously they're not going to have the means as a film that has a
Yeah.
huge budget. So I think it also helps kind of understand the quality of the filmmaking when you understand what the budget was and what the
Yeah.
filmmakers had to work with. So
I like it because then
um,
obviously without it's obviously in the practical effects days and huge limitations on cameras and even especially in the 50s camera limitations where you could
right.
film all this kind of stuff, like you had to get really creative. So I
Yeah.
think even with a lot of films that are cheaper, they're often just kind of interesting. Even if they don't work, they're kind of interesting just from like the perspective of, wow, they really tried to make something cool with this.
Right.
Like, I find that really interesting.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Um, so Jack, I know you and I kind of talked about this earlier, but for the audience that may not know, which of these two did you see first of these two?
So I saw the 78 version first. I saw the
Okay.
78 first, which I'm actually, apart from one scene near the beginning, which obviously you get a little crossover with the lead from the 50s version, which I didn't realize obviously until after seeing.
Yeah.
Um, I'm happy I saw the 78 version first, I think.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
kind of had a bit more appreciation because it was like that was the one that's probably, I would say now it's probably more well known, isn't
Yeah.
it? Realistically, like more people have probably seen that. So I think when you know how good that is, you're into the story, and then it's like, oh, let's see how they did it originally. I think it kind of makes it more interesting. Sadly, with the 70s one though, I put off watching it for a long while. I had meant kind of wanted to watch it for years, but I'd seen the last scene, which I mean, I'm assuming for our audience here, we are going to be going into spoilers, so I'll say it now. But
Yeah. Yeah.
the finale scene I'd already seen because you get like channels that will show top horror moments, and of
Right.
course that moment always tends to come up in like scary, iconic horror
Mhm.
moments. And I'd seen that, and I wish I hadn't seen that before watching the film. So I almost felt like like because I know that scene's coming, it kind
Yeah.
of put me off watching it for a while.
Right.
But yeah, finally got around to watching it, loved it. And then obviously we were discussing doing a versus, and that's when I came
Mhm.
around to most recently seeing the 50s
The
one.
original. Did you know that that iconic scene was the end scene of the 78 one, or did you just know that was in the film at some
No, I
point?
knew it. I knew it was the ending. I knew it was the end
Okay.
of that film,
Oh,
sadly,
man.
which is really annoying. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
I
Ah,
it's so hard with classic horror films that were kind of before your time. It's like
right.
there's like it's like the Shining with the Here's Johnny scene.
Mhm.
Like, okay, it's not as pivotal to the enjoyment of The Shining, I would say. This is
Right.
probably a bigger moment in the context of the film, but it's like
Yeah.
you can't avoid that because of the
Right.
age we are. You are just
Right.
going to see this stuff like
Or
it's like
like
the chest burster in Alien.
yeah,
Chest
yeah,
burster in
yes.
Alien's another
Yep.
great example.
Yep, that
I knew
one.
it. I knew I'd seen the scene before the film, so
Right.
it's like
Yeah,
you
or
know,
the "We're gonna need the bigger boat" in Jaws,
yeah,
like, certain scene that you
exactly.
just know is
You
coming.
you know it's coming, and it's like I can imagine watching some of these movies for the first time, particularly Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like the 70s
Yeah.
one. Like that final scene is really scary, even by
Oh, yeah.
even knowing it's coming, and even by modern standards, I think is a genuinely unsettling scene. As I was watching, I thought to myself, I was like, oh, imagine, like I say, back in the day in a
Right.
cinema, not knowing that was coming, that must have been like, wow,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, especially not knowing it was coming. That, that would've been good 'cause, so I saw the original first. I didn't grow up
Oh,
with it
cool.
necessarily, but I saw it a couple times with my dad. I remember, seeing that one, and then I didn't see the 78 one until years later. So and I didn't know about the ending in 78. So I got that experience fresh.
Amazing.
And when I saw it, I was just like, "Whoa, what?"
What?
It's very different ending than the original. That's
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
spoiler alert, but that's not in the original. So, when I saw that, I was just like, Whoa.
That's what I
Whoa.
loved, actually, going back to the 50s one, that obviously, like, the core, like, the story is the same, but
Yeah.
the way it's kind of handled and the character moments, the ending, they're quite different. And I really liked that, kind of going back and watching and seeing at the end, it was kind of going off in that slightly different direction. I was like, oh, I really like this. I like the kind of that they did
Yeah.
actually change it up. Obviously, they wanted probably something a bit more shocking and a bit more like,
Right.
I guess, scary, but in by the 70s standard one.
Right.
I think they're probably going for the more like visceral scares and stuff, because it's
Yeah.
definitely the scarier of the two films. But I did like where they went with the original, and seeing the two different endings does make them like more interesting to compare for sure.
Right. Well, and I mean, um, with the remake, like if you're gonna do a remake and you're gonna change something, I mean, that's one way to make a change without changing the story. So you can still recognize the story from the original, but still making it different enough and leaving it on a, crazy type of
Yeah,
note that you don't see
yeah,
coming. So that was a really creative way to kind of add
it
something new
was.
to it.
Because remakes are a difficult one in general. Because I feel like older remakes, when you think of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Fly,
Yeah.
The Thing, they're looked on a lot more fondly
Mhm.
than modern remakes. Does feel like it's synonymous with negativity
Right.
and like,
Right.
oh no, remake, oh no, they're doing that on a. But like then, like nobody thinks now, oh god, they remade Invasion of the Body Snatchers. People didn't think that. I assume they didn't back then either.
Right.
And I don't know whether it's just because they were of higher quality and they genuinely brought new ideas to the table, or whether it's just now, because of the
Mhm.
trend of remakes we've had, people are just kind of tired of seeing another filmmaker remake things for the modern age. But back then, it's actually very interesting to see the two. And I'm somebody who's a bit like you, really. I know we're both probably a bit more forgiving of remakes than probably
Yeah.
most horror fans in general, I would say. Um,
Right.
but the old ones did it well. They always did it well.
For sure. And you got to respect the originals for having the original concept or ideas, regardless of if a remake takes that story and does it better, and some do. It's still the original that did it first. So you always got to
Yeah.
respect that at least. Russell saying both original and remake is good. Besides the aliens annoying me in remake, I did enjoy them. It's funny. Um, so okay, so you saw the 78 first. I saw the original first. What was your initial thoughts of both? I know sometimes you watch a movie, you don't really
Yeah.
like it at first, but then it kind of grows on you over time. Sometimes it's the
Yeah.
opposite. What were
Absolutely.
your initial thoughts for both?
I mean, the 78 one is interesting for me because the more I've thought about it since I've seen it, the much more I like it. Like
Mhm.
I'm already wanting to revisit the 78
Yeah,
one, knowing what I know about it, because I think because I already knew the story was good going into the 50s version. And like the 50s version is a shorter, tighter film, I think. That's one thing,
yeah,
because I won't go into it yet, but I'm still a bit torn between them on which I like more. But the 70s one, it took a little bit for me to get going because I wasn't familiar or that familiar with the
mhm,
story. And it's a slower film, as it takes its time a
yeah,
lot more. It's more methodical with the way it sets it up, the character building at the beginning. And when you get to that payoff in the final, was probably about half an hour, really, is where things go really mental.
yeah,
Um, and it makes that whole build up better. So I feel like with a lot of films like that, they benefit from revisiting because you appreciate all those moments leading to that. Whereas the 70s one, I got to about halfway and I was like, oh, it's good, but I wasn't absolutely gripped. So I wasn't like
mhm,
really into it. And it's only when it starts to go, off the rails in the second half that I was like, wow, damn, this film's amazing, and just
yeah,
really got sucked into it. Whereas the 50s one, I think from the beginning, I was into it. I was
mhm,
really into it because maybe that's because I was like excited to see what they were going to do with it. Maybe it's because at the beginning it just moves a little bit, like that opening scene where you visit the doctor and he's already seen things and he's telling the story retrospectively.
right,
It's like, oh, that like I love that. It just has a. I think the opening of the 50s one pulls you in quicker.
yeah,
Whereas the 70s one is like, in hindsight, it's got better just because I think some of the moments in it are so good.
right.
So
Yeah, well, and I think I think kind of like the 56 one may have the higher floor as far as consistency, whereas the 78 has a little bit higher ceiling and how good it gets. It may
Totally
not
agree.
be as good throughout, but when it gets good, I think it gets better than the 56
Yeah,
one.
I totally agree. That's how I feel about it as well.
Yeah.
So I think the 50s one was like instantly I knew I liked it. Like, I
Yeah.
watched it and I thought, wow, that was great. And because there is a sense as well with say by we were talking about this obviously before the stream started, like in the 70s, horror found its footing quite well. Like the 70s is a strong decade for horror.
Oh
You've
yeah.
got a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
very innovative, creative horror that packed a little bit more of a punch, I think, than some of the earlier stuff. So the 70s is like, for me, if somebody recommends me a 70s horror film, I'm already intrigued. Like, oh, I'm going to definitely
Right.
check that out. Whereas if someone says, oh, there's a 50s one that's interesting, I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it. I'll get to
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I will
Yeah.
watch it. I will watch it, but I'm
Yeah.
not instantly like really excited, I guess, to see it.
Right.
So I think the 50s one actually took me by surprise how quickly I was like, damn, this is
Yeah.
this is great.
Yeah, Jack and I were talking before the stream, and I told him the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers may actually be my favorite horror film from the 50s. It would be between that and Godzilla. But this one's definitely in contention because it compared to the majority of 50s horror films, man, this one just hits it out of the park, man.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so good.
So how long
Uh
ago did you see these films then? I know you've seen both of them quite a few times then.
yeah.
You've
I mean,
kind of
so
viewed them a number of times over the years?
yeah, 56, I probably saw the first time maybe 12, 13. I think I
Wow.
saw a couple times when I was a teenager. And then I didn't see the remake until maybe mid-20s,
Okay.
mid to late 20s. And I was kind of hesitant to watch the remake for a while because I loved the original. And for me, I'm someone that can kind of be like attached to one. Like if I love an original, I'm like, man, I kind of don't want to see the remake because I don't
Yeah.
know that this like it's kind of like Jaws. Like I don't ever want a remake of Jaws. To me,
No.
Jaws is something you leave alone. That's lightning in a bottle. You just you let it be the greatness that it is.
Yeah.
Or like we've talked about The Crow. For me, there's only one Crow movie, and that's Brandon Lee, the original '94. I have no intention of seeing the remake at all.
Make
Because
it
I
stay
just
that way.
yeah, yeah. From what I've
Oh
heard,
man.
I plan
Oh
on keeping it.
man.
So yeah,
Oh
for a
no.
while, I didn't want to watch the remake because I love that original. But then when I did watch the remake, I was really glad I did. Although I will say I didn't love the remake at first. It was one where I was like, okay, that was good. But I still definitely like the remake better. But then I saw the remake a second time and it got a lot better because I think I
Yeah.
just certain things stuck out more.
I can understand that. That's the
Yeah,
thing about I feel like the 50s one on first watch, if you're into that kind of thing and you appreciate older horror,
right,
I feel like most people will actually just really like it on first
right,
watch. Whereas the 70s one, if somebody said to me, not really my thing or not entirely working for me, I wouldn't be like shocked by that. There's
right.
certain films where you think, wow, like if someone didn't like George, you're like, what? What do you mean? As a horror
Yes,
fan, what do you mean? But that Body Snatch, I'm like, I could understand it to an extent because it
right.
is quirky. It's a quirky style that the
Yeah,
film has,
yeah.
and the pacing of it is it's
It's a bit
deliberate, but
slow.
it
Yeah.
imagine it being slow for some people.
Yeah. Well, and it's one that I feel like the when you, if you're really trying to get to the core of the meaning of it, you need at least the second watch. Because for me, I didn't really see any meaning in it the first time, but as I've watched it multiple times over the years, it's gotten better upon each
Yeah,
rewatch. I see it better. I see it fuller. And I can take it on its own terms, which is
yeah,
another thing because I think it's hard sometimes when you're coming to a remake. If you've already seen the original, you have that locked in your mind, so
absolutely.
you judge the remake by the original without
Yeah,
taking the remake on its own terms. You know what I mean?
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the difficult thing with remakes sometimes, isn't it? Because you go in with sort of a preconceived idea about. It's like people say about when you've read a really good book, and in
Right.
your head you've got the story in your head. You know how much you loved it. You love the way the characters play, and then on screen you're watching it and you're thinking, "Ah, it's not quite matching
Right.
how I felt this should be or how I want it to be." But it's like I shouldn't be watching this as an adaptation of their book.
Right.
I should just see it as a separate thing. But I think it's kind of the same way of remakes. People go into it and automatically it's frustrating them because they love that original and it's going its own way. And you think,
Right.
not sure about this.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to kind of take remakes on their own terms sometimes. I
Yeah.
think, and I honestly I think that's one reason horror remakes get a bad rap a lot in the communities because people want to judge them by the
Yeah.
original standards instead of just taking
Yeah,
them
and
on their.
people love the like in horror, people are passionate
Oh
about
yeah.
originals.
Yeah.
I think probably more than any other genre. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
Like more than any other genre, horror, people that love their originals love them, and
Yes.
if someone's going to
They
touch them,
do.
it's going to have to be bloody good. Like,
They really do, man. Yeah, I've definitely figured that out over the years as I've talked to horror fans about certain movies. Friday the 13th.
yeah, yeah. Well, there
Um,
you go. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Perfect example right there.
Like people
Uh,
hate that remake, like that. As we obviously we covered this in our last stream, but like people hate that
definitely.
remake. But I think if you were actually looking at them as two separate films,
Yeah.
the amount of hate it gets is obviously not warranted. It's
No.
all to do with people who grew up loving that original, and
Right.
anything that's not quite like it, they're going to be automatically suspicious of it and not
Yeah.
on board with it. Um, Whereas I think probably a lot of people now discussing something like Invasion of the Body Snatchers probably won't have the same kind of ties to it because they're both, I mean, they're both bloody old movies now. I mean, even
Right.
even the newer one is what, 50
Yeah,
coming up
78.
50 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like
50 years.
it's an
Yeah.
old, yeah, coming up, yeah, 40, yeah, 48 years. So that's an old movie already. So I
That
guess
really is.
naturally now people are probably a little bit more open-minded. I've
Right.
never heard anyone say, "Oh, the 78 version just ruined it, ruined it." I've never
Right.
heard somebody talk like that about it.
No. But honestly, I feel like that at least people that I've talked with, I think I feel like most people have seen the 78, but not the 56.
Yeah,
Uh, but which is kind of interesting because most people watch originals first and then remakes. But I
yeah.
don't know what it is. Maybe a lot of people in the horror community maybe just kind of grew up with the 70s and 80s type of stuff.
Because I
Um,
think once you've seen stuff like in the 70s, once you've seen The Exorcist, once you've seen Jaws, I mean, in towards the late, we'll get onto this, I'm sure, but like how Invasion of the Body Snatchers had a bit of like commentary, like,
mhm,
social, political commentary. Obviously,
yep,
that came out the same year as Dawn of the Dead as well.
right,
So I feel, and obviously, a lot of horror fans have seen the original Romero Dawn of the Dead. So if
right,
you've watched Dawn of the Dead, if you've watched 70s, late 70s stuff, it's not going to be long before you've seen recommendations for that the 78 Body Snatchers film. Let's
right,
like you've got Don't Look Now with
yep.
Donald Sutherland as well. Again, early mid 70s, I think.
Yeah,
73,
73.
74,
Yeah,
73.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, something like that. There you are. So, I feel like it's quite quick. You're gonna come across that movie and you're gonna be aware
right.
of it if you have any familiarity with sort of horror in the 70s and the kind of tone they were taking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that's a good transition into the story and the writing here. We can get into I do think so. I mean, it's kind of the same premise, the same concept in both films, but I do think that they focus on different themes, different thematic focus of the two.
Yeah.
Which of the two, as far as the story goes, do you prefer?
You see, in
You know,
terms of the story and what they're trying to get at with it, I probably I probably like the 50s one more
okay,
because I love that kind of, I mean, obviously the whole thing about paranoia,
right,
and knowing something is wrong, but not being able to prove it to anybody,
mhm,
not being able to explain it to anybody. And by the
right,
time you can explain it to anybody, it's too late. Like, I think that is the way they handle it in that 50s film, I think is really great. Like, those initial scenes you get where he's getting the calls to people and, he's saying, I just feel like something's wrong with them. Like, I can't
yeah,
tell you anything about their behavior. They look the same, they sound the same, but I just know something's wrong. and the way they're really unsettled about it, and that's what makes him curious about this whole case. But
Right.
you can't really get help because there's no way of actually proving it. I love that, and I think in that film in particular, it is handled really well. And again, I haven't seen probably enough of thrillers, sci-fi horror from the 50s and before to know
Yeah.
whether that sort of thing had been done many times before that. But I think the way they handle that in the film is very good because it does feel lonely, it does feel isolating, and like there's no hope kind of thing. I think they do handle that very well.
Right. Yeah. And I do think that the original kind of pursues more the psychological horror aspect, the paranoia, like you said, where
Yeah.
it almost makes you feel like if you put yourself in the Dr. Bennell's shoes, like you're crazy.
Yeah.
Because no one's believing you, but you know you're not. You know you're seeing and experiencing what you're experiencing, but no one believes you, and so that
Yeah.
creates that psychological horror where you don't know what's going on, you don't know how to fight it. Whereas the 78 one, I feel like the focus is more not necessarily creature feature, but more on like the actual aliens and taking over
It
the
does.
body type of thing. And I
Yeah.
do think that, I feel like the one of the main thematic differences with 56, I kind of see this theme of losing identity, losing your identity, and becoming kind of emotionally numb, where you don't, it almost forces you to confront that question of who am I? Am I still human? Is society still functioning, and still, appreciating humanity, type of theme
Yeah.
throughout the film, and kind of trying to numb you emotionally to your surroundings. It almost kind of feels like
Yeah.
a post-war type of, just go with the flow type of thing. Don't question authority. Just do as you're told type of thing. And what
Keep
that
everything
can,
in order because they
yes,
talk about that a lot, don't they? Where it's like they almost try and persuade them that it's better. It's like you
right,
don't feel emotion, but it doesn't matter. It's actually better. It's
right,
everything's in order, and it's like I don't care if it's better. I don't want it to be that way. I
right,
love that's kind of the way the characters talk about it. It's like you're fighting to keep humanity, even if it's
yes,
more flawed, even if it's not better, even if we
right,
are individually flawed. It's
right.
actually that is humanity. That's what we love, and obviously we don't want to lose that. And I do think it kind of captures that well.
Yeah, I do too, and I think, it kind of, the central character here, Dr. Bennell, he kind of represents the voice of warning, against the horror of just becoming emotionally numb and just kind of
Yeah,
going along with the powers that be and doing what they tell you to do.
yeah, yeah,
Part of being human is the fact that you can resist the powers that be. You
yeah.
can make your own choices. You have your emotional uh scale that you can feel. I
I
think
can
the
imagine this having been very interesting to have watched back
yeah,
then for people who obviously grew up and were adults during the war, and as you say, were maybe involved in it, what they would kind of think about that. Because as you say, it's like they lived in a world where you had to trust authority. If you were
right,
like, at that time, especially in the countries that were major players in World War II, it's like you literally did have to follow authority. There was strict
right,
order in place because of the global scale of everything that's going on. And I
yeah,
kind of like this idea that it's like authority, and obviously in the film started to play with those ideas. Like, what if authority has ulterior motives? What if they have an
right.
agenda? What if they're, and it's like, it's such a good theme to play into for film.
Oh,
Obviously,
for
like,
sure.
how do you trust? How do you know who to trust? And why should you trust them? Because they're authority. It's like this
Right.
film is kind of tackling that in the early days. And it's like, yeah, I bet it was very interesting given the sort of like the industrial and the war times that they were kind of living in back
Yeah.
then.
Well, and just that central question or premise of, can you trust authority, is frightening. If you can play into that paranoia, it can create a really good kind of horror plot in a film. And I think they explore that really well. Whereas the
Yeah.
78, I think, They take the same story, but I feel like they focus more on kind of thematic differences of disconnecting, almost this disconnection from humanity and
Yeah,
disconnecting from relationships, because we see relationships breaking down more in the 78.
yeah.
We see, people feeling disconnected. What's her name, the main lady in the 78 one, Brooke Adams plays, I think,
Yeah, that's
Elizabeth.
the actress. Yeah, I can never remember her name, just the actress. Yeah,
Yeah, Elizabeth Driscoll, I think. We see her, her relationship with her husband breaking down and there being a disconnection there. And then
yeah,
ultimately later on in the film, her relationship with Matthew, and there's a disconnection there. So it almost feels like they're trying to focus on uh the consequences of not forming those connections with other
yeah.
humans, and the
Because they do
importance of,
focus on that. They focus on that a lot
yeah,
as well, don't they? In the one where it's like they show a lot more scenes of the aliens, where
yeah,
they're really numb and they're talking in a very sort of like cold and like emotionless kind of way. They
right,
obviously hint at that more in the 50s one, but you don't get to see as much of it because mostly you're around people who you don't know yet.
right.
They don't show it as much. Whereas in the 70s one, you see a lot of people who
Yeah,
are already aliens, and you see how they react, and it obviously does like to focus on that. Um,
right. And I think that the 78, they kind of pose a question of, what could happen to society if you don't trust anybody. Because that's really like the looming theme of nobody trusts anybody. Elizabeth doesn't think she can trust her husband. She
yeah,
questions her trust with Matthew. Matthew ends up questioning his trust with her, with society. You have Jeff Goldblum, who feels like
yeah,
he can't really trust anybody. So
yeah.
and when
But I
you
mean, this
can't,
comes at like it was the Watergate. This was just after the Watergate
yeah, yeah, yeah,
scandal, wasn't it? As well, and it's like
right,
distrust in government must have been
hmm,
at an all-time high then, like what they kind of swore on oath
right,
and did at that time. And it goes to show that even the people running your country are willing to barefaced lie for their
oh yeah,
own agenda. And it's like
right,
at that point, you can just imagine like politically how people would feel that sense of like, it doesn't matter whether it's the police, whether it's the government, whether it's
yeah,
your doctor, whoever it might be, almost this sense of I can only trust myself. I can only know my own mind, trust the people around me.
right,
And that's my base. That's what I'm going to kind of go off. And then obviously in this, you begin with that where automatically people already have that kind of, you can sense that in the society of the 70s one. But then
yeah,
obviously eventually you have the trust even eroded of the closest people to you. So you're just, the fear, I think the scary thing that comes from that film is like that feeling of just being alone in the world where you can't
right,
trust anyone. You don't know that anybody can have your back, which is
yeah,
why I think that final scene is so
right,
impactful, 'cause it's
right.
just,
Yeah, and I think I actually think the 78 ending works. Like it doesn't feel like in, you see in horror films sometimes that last surprise scare that they try to force in at the end and it just doesn't work. You feel like, film didn't really need it. I feel like the 78 remake actually that needed that. I think it worked because it keeps that central theme of the lack of trust
yeah,
in each other, and
yeah,
ultimately it leads to that where you're just isolated, you're in a world by your own, and you're disconnected from humanity because you don't trust humanity, you don't trust
yeah.
anybody.
And there's
And
no
so I
way to even know if you can trust anyone like that. I think they do
right,
that so well in that film. That's why I love that last half an hour so much because you, as
yeah,
a viewer, you're sitting there, and that when they're talking to each other, you're like, I really want these people to
yes,
still be human and to have because they've obviously found out in
right,
better time than obviously a lot of the rest of society. So it's like, oh, thank goodness for that. They can bond together and maybe find a way out of this thing because they've clocked onto it soon enough. And
right,
even then, they find out that they were too late, or effectively, or maybe it was just inevitable anyway because of how fast this thing kind of infects the towns and cities. But it's just absolutely devastating
yeah,
that ending, and yeah, I think that's why it's definitely the darker film. I think it's definitely the more like depressing film, like especially
Yeah.
that ending. Like when you think of the implication of what that ending really means,
Right.
you're like, wow, it's all over.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
that's a hard, and it's like that silent credit, and you just I think you're
Yes.
sitting there just thinking, oh,
Yes. So
life.
good. Yeah. It to me, that's how a horror film should end is, with that kind of like because I always say, like, when I come to a horror film, I want that horror factor to be there. I don't wanna go to a horror film. That's why I'm not that big on horror comedies.
Yep.
Like, if I want a comedy, I'm gonna go to a comedy film, but when I'm in a horror film, I want that horror presence to
Yeah,
be there, and I wanna be
absolutely.
hit with that, and so I feel like the '78 remake does that with that ending. It leaves you with that gut punch where you're just like, "Damn, dude, like, that
Yeah,
was
and it feels
dark."
earned. It feels earned. Like,
Yes.
our
Yeah.
for anyone that's watching knows our good mate Brian Lomax,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
we obviously discuss horror with a lot because he's a bit more critical, I think, of horror than we are.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
he's generally speaking, he doesn't like sort of endings that end up going too dark or feels like these days horror goes quite dark. And
Right,
I don't necessarily dislike that, but I do think often it perhaps doesn't earn it.
right.
In that with like your example where it's like the final thing is just there to be like sequel potential or final
Right,
big scare,
right.
just like a popcorn moment. Whereas
Yeah,
I love a dark ending. I really do
mhm.
like that feel. Like at the end, feeling that sense of hopelessness and fear. Like that's what a horror film that's what makes it impactful and stick with you. Like this film, I've thought about it a lot. I've thought about this film a lot,
Mhm.
and it's like I just think having when it's you can feel when it's earned. You feel like when
Yep,
the story is led to a natural conclusion, and that this does really feel like the natural conclusion. Like
right.
this to me is a story of humans like annihilation almost, and this is how it goes. And it feels, yeah, it feels like the right ending, but there's no getting around the fact that it
Yeah.
is a depressing film.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that so I kind of like analyze the two. I think the original is the funner of the two, but I think the remake is the scarier and darker of the two. Like I have fun with the original. Like it's
Yeah.
like I'm like, yes, this is fun. You kind of have a little bit of that adrenaline going with just the paranoia. You're just like, oh man, this is crazy, crazy story. But like I'm enjoying it along the way where the remake hits harder emotionally and it's scarier and darker. And I'm just like, damn, dude, it sticks with me more than the
Yeah.
original one.
Yeah.
But I think the original is a little more rewatchable because it's funner. Not I'm not necessarily saying it's better overall, but I think it's more rewatchable because
Yeah.
I don't have to be in a certain mood
I
for it.
agree.
Just
I
throw it
totally agree.
on
Yeah.
and enjoy
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Where
I think that it's every aspect of it is a little bit lighter. Like don't like it definitely still has its dark moments, I
oh,
think.
for
Like
sure.
when
Yeah.
they first go into that garden and they discover the pods
Yes.
and stuff, it's still quite a
Yeah.
creepy moment, really. It's quite like, oh wow,
Yeah.
this is when stuff is getting serious.
Right.
And it definitely still has its moments. But you are right, like there's a general tone of the whole film which does feel a little bit lighter. I think because the lead actor as well, the character that he's playing,
Mhm.
he's a very sort of charismatic sort of guy as well. He's hooking up with back with the girl that he knew from a while ago, and you get into
Right.
their relationship, and there is like a sense of positivity. So even when things start going downhill, it's about them wanting to be together and escape and all this kind of stuff. Whereas
Yeah.
in the remake, it's like from the start, he's already paranoid that things are wrong,
Yeah.
things feels wrong. Like it starts on a note of like things are not right. It's
Right.
there's that kind of sense the whole way through. So as you say, it's like the original is definitely more of a movie you could throw on, have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
Even though it is tackling similar themes, it just does it in a slightly different way and makes it
Yeah.
ultimately quite a different film.
Right, and I think that the pacing in the first one is a little better just in the sense that it moves along better, it's faster, it gets in and out. It doesn't there's no fi I don't think there's really any filler in the remake, but it's just the pacing's a little bit more slower. It's deliberate, but it's a little bit
Yeah,
slower in revealing the plot along the way. Um,
yeah,
but in the remake's advantage is and this is where I think it beats the original, is it leaves that stronger impression. It like it when I watch it, I think about it longer, for a longer period of time afterwards. It sticks with, it hits harder
Yeah, yeah.
emotionally. And some horror movies are like that. You have some horror movies, I'm sure we all can think of examples where it's just a fun time. You just love watching it. It's a lot of fun. Scream is like that for me.
Yeah.
Return of the Living Dead, just
Yeah.
fun horror
Love it.
films. But then other ones are just like, they're not as rewatchable, but the reason they're not as rewatchable is because they hit so hard on an emotional level that you're like, I don't know that I want to feel that very
Yeah.
often,
Yeah.
because it just
Absolutely.
lingers with you.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
no, definitely. As you say, it's like that's why it's often hard to kind of rate films against each other sometimes
yeah,
because some are so mood dependent. And I didn't really realize that the 78 version would be like that because I think in the first half of it as well, because you don't really know entirely where it's all going, I was quite surprised by how dark it gets
yes, yeah,
as the film goes on. So as you say, like since I've thought about it a lot, but I haven't had that sense of like, right, I need to rewatch this. Like I need to
right,
have my
right,
mates over, let's have some drinks and watch and watch. And,
yeah,
it's not really that kind of movie.
no,
And
no,
actually, there's a number of horror films around that time that I think are like that. Ones that I've definitely
yeah,
thought about and I like, but they're not the sort of movies that I think I'm just
right.
gonna, rewatch for fun. Like the '80s definitely has a lot more movies like more like that kind of way. But
For
yeah.
sure. Speak of the devil, we have Brian Lomax showing
Oh,
up, 78 version for me, you freaks.
so
Yeah,
Brian, I was just mentioning about how you don't like sad or dark endings,
yeah,
and we
no,
and we get onto this.
yeah, but he'll watch Critters 80 times a year, but he think, yeah, yeah.
I can't
So
remember if Critters has a happy ending or not.
no, well,
I
no
haven't
one
seen
can
it in a few
remember
years.
anything about Critters because it's just, it's barely a 2-star film on a good day. But Brian will, he'll pop that on 80 times a year. But yeah. But no, I think that the 70s, I think the collectively 70s horror has more of those, like they hit harder emotionally, not as rewatchable, but they stick with me longer. Whereas the 80s are you're more fun,
Yeah,
rewatchable. I can throw these on
yeah,
anytime and just be entertained. Um, but I think a lot of the horror films from the 70s, I like they stick with me. The
yeah,
Exorcist, this one, The Omen, I like a lot of them are
yeah.
heavier, I think, thematically.
I have to admit, these days, I am finding myself more intrigued by those kind of horror films because, like you, I mean, I've seen a lot of horror from
Yeah, yeah,
most decades. I've seen a lot now. I've seen a
yeah.
lot for a lot of years, and I love it. It's my favorite genre.
Oh yeah, me
Absolutely
too.
love it. But I am starting to want to, and I'm thinking about and wanting to check out kind of slightly older, stranger horror movies again, particularly from this kind of era
Right.
rather than just the fun stuff now because it's like I just you just go through phases, don't you, with movies where there's certain things that kind of grab your attention a little bit more, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of more talking about. That's why it's great to get to talk about the Invasion of the Body Snatchers films because at the moment, like these kind of movies, I love sort of analyzing them and thinking about and discussing
Right.
these, and it's just at the moment these are the kind of movies that I'm into. But
Yeah, well, and it's fun because once if you're like getting to kind of a new decade of horror that where you haven't maybe seen a whole lot of films from them, but you start seeing like a lot that are really good, man, you can just go down a rabbit hole of just watching that's basically what happened to me for the 70s. Like, I
yeah,
had
and you've
seen
seen. I mean, how many have you seen from the '70s again?
I've
What is,
seen officially just over 200 horror films from the 70s.
wow.
But it happened because of that. Like I love Jaws, I loved Halloween, I love The Exorcist, I love Alien, and so like I was loving so many of these horror films from the 70s that I just kept going. I'm like, oh, what else do they have? What else do they have? What else do they have?
Yeah.
Uh, and it got me eventually over 200. Not all of them were good, obviously. But but
I think after you told me how many you'd seen, I remember I typed into AI. I was like, approximately how many horror movies from the '70s do you have to see before you get into the dodgy stuff? It was like 50 and you're good. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
Clayton's seen a lot then. He's
Yes.
long gone past that.
Right. Jack, I got to run to the restroom real quick. If you want to keep talking about the story or characters, I will be right back, guys.
Keep people entertained. But yeah, so I'll say I'll give my final thoughts on the 50s film for people who are in here watching. I think with the 50s one other thing I do think that I like about it being an older movie is that I was amazed at how tight the film was. Like it's unbelievably tight, and I don't know if it is considered a tight horror film by 50s standards, but compared to the 70s one, definitely. The pacing on that movie is unbelievably fast. It really is very, very fast paced. And it's like 80 minutes and they put in like an extraordinary amount of story without it feeling really rushed, I think. So, I think the 50s one in that sense I was kind of more impressed by in a way because it kind of took me more by surprise because Kay and I were talking about this before the stream got started that there's a lot of 50s films that cover sort of similar themes and ideas and stuff, and a lot of it can feel dated and slow and they're not all hits, which is why I was a bit more like apprehension going in to the 50s one. But actually, it is a very fast-paced film that would have felt quite at home sort of in the 60s and 70s. But say a thing here from Brian saying, what's that t-shirt? This t-shirt is The Howling. It's a Howling t-shirt that I got specially for the occasion of Clayton being here. I tell you, Brian was asking me what t-shirt I'm wearing. I thought, mate, for you, I've got my Howling t-shirt on.
I love it. I love it.
It's actually it's from that Fright Rags.
Oh yeah.
It's about Fright Rags. I did do one order because I think they're based in the US, aren't they? They're based in the States.
Nice.
And it cost a lot of money, but I ordered like 3. I was like, I'll do one order, and I found this Howling one. I was like, I have to have it.
That's awesome. No, I love it. Anytime you bring werewolves to a stream, man, you're getting perks from me. So yeah, I love it. So what you're on the characters though, right?
Yeah, I was just talking about my general thoughts as well on the on my feeling of the pace of the 50s one. Because we were saying, you were talking about before with 50s horror films with like, they cover a lot in the stories, they cover a lot of certain they cover similar themes, they cover similar ideas and stuff like that. And it's actually quite refreshing to see a film like this told in such a tight way. Like I think it does kind of stand out quite a bit in terms of 50s horror.
Yeah, no, for sure. Speaking of characters though, like if we obviously both movies have a central character named Benel. I think they give them different first names though. The 56 is Miles Benel, and then 78 is Matthew Benel. 78 has more supporting characters around them versus the original. Kind of follows the doctor and his relationship with the girl throughout the whole film. Whereas 78, you have Matthew, you have Elizabeth, you have Goldblum's character in there, the lady's Elizabeth's husband, some other characters. Do you have I think you would probably agree with me on this. I don't know. Do you think the 78 one handles the characters better than the original?
It's a good question. I think they're a bit more fleshed out, aren't they? They're a little bit deeper characters. Like even with like Goldblum's character, they get into this whole thing about him like not liking that guy who's writing that book and stuff. It's like there's more detail to the characters. I think if you wanted to actually look and like study the characters and stuff, there's a lot more going on in the 70s ones. I think they're a little bit they're more deeply written, I guess. There's a bit more going on. But I also do think at the same time that it's not all good. I think there's parts of the story in the 70s one, like the whole thing with Goldblum where they end up going into that kind of hospital and wing and stuff. Obviously, that's one of the first moments where they start to really let on like that something's really going on. And for me, I think some of that is not actually necessarily needed. It's not that I don't like the characters and stuff. It's for us to spend more time with them and then for them to
Right.
start realizing that something's wrong. I get all that, but I feel like there's parts of that that could have been trimmed out for me. Um,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
love all of that. I like we've got more characters, and I like they're taking a bit of time, but I think it's more flawed in that way. You know.
Right. Yeah, and that's fair. I think the 78 one, the positive to that though is if if you do connect with the characters in 78, I think it has the emotional effect by the end that works a little bit more for me personally. I mean, I liked Kevin McCarthy in the original,
Yeah.
and I find the story very interesting and engaging. But I feel like characters as a whole in the remake I connect to a little bit more, and I think it's because they have you spend more time with them. You know, you kind of see
Yeah.
more natural interactions with them, and kind of see them in their
Yeah.
natural environment and stuff like that. So I feel like I know them a little bit more,
Yeah.
and because we see the isolation happen with Elizabeth over the film. When the separation with her and Matthew finally happens at the end, you're just like,
Yeah.
damn, dude, like it hits harder because of that.
I think that's definitely true. I mean, I do think it is difficult to compare in some ways because I think between like the 50s and the 70s, there's quite a different style change in acting by
Yeah,
that
yeah,
time. Whereas
true.
like in the 70s, it's very like naturalistic
Right,
acting, isn't it? Where you're watching it, it's like Donald Sutherland, like these kind of actors. It feels like real people that you would know. Whereas I feel like in the 50s, they were still kind of transitioning away from that sort of acting for the screen,
yeah,
where it's like they feel like characters in a sense, which is not necessarily a negative. It's just indicative of the time, obviously.
right.
So I do understand that. I think that's why I think they're a little bit difficult to compare
Yeah,
in some ways, because I think that acting style does actually play a little bit into that.
right. Yeah, and that's fair. I think what Kevin McCarthy was doing in the original was the acting style of that time. He
Yeah,
fit right into, what they were doing. But fast forward to 20 years in 1978, the acting style has changed. It's more, feels like a more natural style of acting.
no,
Reactions feel more genuine, more
yeah,
real. Just interactions feel more
yeah.
natural, and
Like
even like,
that scene in the kitchen early on in the 70s one, where Donald Sutherland,
yes,
he has Elizabeth over, and it's like
yeah,
the way he's just cooking dinner for her and the way they're kind of conversing.
right,
It's the stuff like that that makes you start to understand and connect to these
yeah,
characters, and it feels real. It feels like a real thing playing out. Now, I feel a scene like that, you wouldn't really get that the same way
right,
in a 50s movie. Do you know what I mean? Like
right,
every in a 50s movie, it felt like every single scene specifically is there to move the plot along and
yes.
whatnot. Whereas in the 70s, there is a more naturalistic sense to it. So there's just I find them very difficult to compare.
Yeah, that is true. I think it comes down to just kind of like preference, like what some people love the 50s style, that older style of acting. It can be more entertaining, for sure.
Yeah. And they're very
Versus
charming, like the lead
they
two.
are,
They
yeah,
they
yeah,
are very charming. They're very likable to watch, and
right,
they look great. And they obviously were like top tier acts at the time for the camera because they just the
right,
way they kind of carry the film is great. But it's like compared to like Donald Sutherland as a lead, it's very different.
yeah, yeah, that's true. Jason saying, I've only seen the 78 one. Dude, you gotta watch the original, brother. You gotta watch the original. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Brian says Donald Sutherland is one of my favorite actors. He's great in 78. He is. Donald Sutherland, I think, definitely.
It is amazing.
I
Yeah,
wouldn't say he makes that film because I do think some of the other characters are really good. I think Jeff Goldblum does a really good job in it. I think the actress who plays Elizabeth does a really good job, but he's definitely, I think, very impactful to the film. I think if you take Sutherland out of that movie, it loses something. I don't
yeah,
think you can just cast anybody in that role. I think
yeah.
he brings a certain kind of charm to that
He's
role.
very interesting to watch. Like Don't Look
He
Now in
is.
particular, it's like
Yeah.
he does make that film. Like that's a film where
Yes.
I often can't decide if I like that. I mean, I do like it, but I think there's elements of the film where I'm like, if that wasn't there, I'm not sure. And I think Donald Sutherland is a big part of that because he's,
Right.
he's a very, very watchable actor and he's interesting and he's quiet as well. He's got presence, but he's a quiet actor as well. And it works.
Yeah, he has great subtlety. Brian says, and Veronica Cartwright is
Yeah.
unbeatable at playing hysterical. That's very true.
She has like a great sort of scream, surprised look, doesn't she?
Does.
Like,
Yeah, she really
yeah.
does.
She's always playing those roles. She's literally. I've only seen her in a handful of films, but she's always like in a big scene, screaming, looking shocked.
Right.
That's what they cast her for.
She probably think, well, this is what I do good at, so
Yeah, you've got to call her up for that.
yeah. Play the hits.
Because her in Alien, isn't it? Obviously it's Alien, isn't it? Where the chest bursts, and the first person it cuts to is her,
right?
And she's just absolutely screaming as the blood's spraying over her.
Her scream gets a little annoying in Alien for me. I don't know why.
There is a lot of it.
Yeah, it gets a little annoying. Brian says 78 has way more atmosphere. I do think 78 has more atmosphere, and that is something that plays in its favor. But I just, man, the pacing in the original, I almost feel like it doesn't need the atmosphere because it does such a good job with the pacing and with the story, moving from one plot point to the other. It doesn't lag at any point. It doesn't, like, I've seen so many films where they will spend way too much time on just like one specific, scene or sequence, and they just drag it out longer than it needs to. And you're just like, okay, you could trim that whole scene in half and just move on to the next point. But 56 is a really good job of just getting in and out, hitting the plots, moving forward, the way that it reveals plot and tension throughout the film. I think it just does a really good job at that. But yeah, so which
I think
version...
in atmosphere, I would agree on the 78 for atmosphere, I guess, because it's, I mean, again, as we were saying, it's kind of, it's more by design in that film. They're quite different in that way. Like, I don't think the 50s one is trying to be, because I do think like the 70s one is quite similar in a way to Don't Look Now, where it's like not a lot's happening, but it wants you to feel like something's just wrong. Like, that is the tone. And that is not really what the 50s one is going for. It is a little bit different in that respect.
Agreed.
But if you love that atmosphere, then great. Because it is great. And especially when at the end it kicks off, like that atmosphere build makes you realize like, whoa, I've been really into this. And suddenly now, like, everything is much scarier as a result.
Right. What'd you think of the scene, Kevin McCarthy in the 78, the cameo when he's running across the car? And he's still screaming.
I saw someone.
For his life.
I saw on one of the clips where someone put a comment like he's been running for 20 years and he gets hit by the car.
Yeah, there's some funny memes I've seen about that.
Yeah. Obviously, I only remembered, and it was funny afterwards thinking about it, because obviously I saw the 78 first. I was just like, here's just this guy. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That's cool.
I do like that they added that little cameo.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great.
Which version of Benel did you like more? Did you like Sutherland's portrayal or Kevin McCarthy? They are very different, obviously. I don't think either one are bad. I think it's more just kind of like a preference, like which version of that character do you think was done better or works more? I don't know.
It's so tough because I know Donald Sutherland obviously a lot more as an actor, and as a result, I tend to just like the characters he plays. I did love Kevin McCarthy's though in the 50s one. I really do like it. I really liked it. And kind of playing this character, like you were saying at the start, it was kind of one of the earlier films of that whole idea of like the doctor who's saying, if he says he's crazy, then you've got to remember, obviously he says he's not crazy. That's because he actually is crazy. He like kind of plays on that whole thing. And I think he does that really well, where he's like becoming more manic. Like he's just a very like normal, enthusiastic type of guy, and he becomes more manic and frustrated as the film is coming on. and because obviously he's trying to convince people, and people are like talking like he's crazy. And I
Right.
think he's really good, and
Yeah,
it suits the film he's in, which is why it's difficult to compare. Because I think for that film, he's a fantastic lead in that. He really is.
for sure. Yeah, I think I think the one I prefer, I guess the one I think is maybe handled a little better is actually Kevin McCarthy, because the reason, not I'm not saying that Sutherland was bad. I think he was great in the remake, but I think that McCarthy's uh portrayal of that character carries that original more than Sutherland's portrayal carries the remake, because with the remake you have Elizabeth, which her that character was also very strong. Jeff Goldblum was also really strong and good in the film. You have more characters to kind of balance the weight distribution, the acting distribution of the remake, where in the original, man, McCarthy really has to carry that film. And I think
Yeah,
he does so. And I think just the very large kind of acting that he does really makes that film. And I
yeah,
think for that reason, because there's more weight on his acting performance, I think that one is probably a little bit better, and the one that I prefer
yeah,
more. But
yeah.
ironically, I actually think Elizabeth is better in the remake. I think she brings a little more emotional weight to to that performance in the remake than in the
Yeah.
original.
I do agree. In the original, though, she is gorgeous. My
Yeah,
goodness, she looks,
yes,
she
yeah,
looks amazing.
for a
I think
50s
she's getting.
woman. Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's doing a lot of work for her. She looks incredible. Yeah, I'm like,
yeah,
gee.
yeah. For a 50s woman, she's not bad. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no, she looks amazing. Yeah, but no,
Uh,
I do agree because I mean, in a lot of ways as well, the original is like an extended Twilight Zone episode, and
it
obviously a lot of
really is.
you know, a lot of the Twilight Zone as well often relied on like one or two, like you know that whole one about
Right.
the guy in the library where he's left at the end of the world in the nuclear. It's like a
Oh, I
nuclear
saw that one.
fallout, and he just wanted to be in the library with all these books. And it's a very big performance. It's a 50s episode, and it's
Okay.
like it's a very big performance from this character, and he really makes it. Like it's a great
Yeah.
idea, and he really carries it because it's all interacting with him as a main character. And it's like you say about the main guy here. If he wasn't selling it, the whole
Right.
film probably wouldn't really work, or wouldn't work as certainly as well as it does.
Right.
So he really has the job because you're seeing everything through his perspective. And
Yeah.
I think he really does make it work. And he doesn't overdo it either. You know, it's not
No.
overdone. He's never unlikable. He's a very likable character.
Mhm.
But I think he really say has a lot of it on his shoulders for the film, whereas the '70s one is a kind of an ensemble
Right.
movie.
Right. And I think you made a good point when you said he doesn't oversell it or overdo it, and that's big because like before he realizes what all is going on, he plays just kind of a natural doctor. He plays it really good, really believable. You can just buy this guy as a doctor, but the manic type of, paranoid performance evolves naturally, in my opinion. He's not just going so large the whole time where it doesn't feel authentic. It's very gradual, real kind of
Yeah,
progression to that point.
yeah,
And I think that's really good acting by
yeah.
McCarthy. It handles it really well.
Because that first scene when you see him, where they go over and they say this doctor's saying all this like paranoid, mad stuff, and they go and see him, and he's acting all really whacked out. When it then
Yeah.
transitions to him and his normal
Yeah.
life, at first I was like, I didn't actually realize at first that it was still him. He does feel like a completely different
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
and as you see that gradual like decline. How
Right.
he's got to this point, and by the end, you're like, look at all the stuff he's been through, and you're like, oh, I get it. You know,
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
it, I get it. But
I I think
it's
the
great.
I think the remake though has the better ending for sure. Like the original had kind of ends not necessarily on a positive note. I mean, the pods still invade the world basically,
Yeah,
but McCarthy at least still breaks through to people, and still
yeah,
kind of gets people to believe him. Where so it kind of gives you a little bit of it kind of eases the tension a little bit and makes you feel like you can breathe at least. Like,
yeah.
okay, at least the people are warned, at least they can maybe figure out something. Where that 78, man, it just like
That's like it's
right.
over.
Yeah, yeah, you're just like,
Yeah,
hey man,
Yeah,
Wow.
no, I
I didn't
didn't
know
feel like
this.
after the 50s one, I didn't feel that sense of like depression sinking
Yeah.
in after it. You know, it's because
Right.
like even though it's
Yeah.
implied that you don't know
Right.
whether he was going to, but it's like, you know, in movies leave you with that little sort of ounce of hope, this
Mhm.
like little idea that there's that someone's onto it. He's found a way, maybe found a way out of this, and is managing to warn people. It's like because you don't know from there, the ambiguity, you're okay leaving it on that note. Whereas the 70s one, it's basically left at a point where you know it's
Right.
over. I think it's
Yeah.
implied that there's nowhere to go here.
No.
There's nowhere to go.
No.
You know.
Well, and I think the emphasis of the remake is on that isolation and the fact that Elizabeth, she's lost everyone now. Like she's lost her
Mm,
husband, she's lost
yeah,
Matthew, like everyone's gone because she never trusted anybody. And that's the
yeah,
result, is that you're in total isolation from everyone else. And
yeah,
they're all basically pods to you. They're
yeah,
all
yeah,
basically these alien specimens because you don't trust them. You've disconnected yourself from humanity because you won't trust anybody. And
yeah,
part of being human is you have to trust other humans. Like we're all
yeah,
humans. Like that's part of connecting to humanity. And yes, it's hard to trust people sometimes, but you have to be willing to connect with other human beings in that
yeah.
way. And so the fact that she wasn't, that's where that emotion comes in. You're just like, man,
Oh
dude,
yeah,
even
yeah,
Matthew's
absolutely.
gone.
Absolutely, it makes it really devastating. I guess that's why so many films have like dealt with that theme, as you rightly point out. Like trust is obviously a massive thing in life for
Right.
relationships, for people, for building life with people, friends, all this kind of stuff. And it's like
Yeah.
it can be easily broken, and it can be very difficult to get it back. And obviously,
Yeah.
there's so many films that have dealt with that theme because it's such a human thing to go through struggling with
Right.
trust and whatever. And obviously this film kind of really leans into that. But
Yeah.
it's a very human thing, and yeah, what better film to do it in than kind of a commentary like we have
Right.
in the Body Snatchers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think we both agree that the remake is scarier.
It's definitely
Overall.
scarier.
Yeah, definitely
Definitely the
scarier.
scarier film.
Yeah.
There's one thing
Um,
actually I forgot to say. This is on the story as well that I forgot to say actually in the story section is that in the 70s one, I think it actually explains better like the pods and what's actually happening with them. Now the
yes.
50s one, you can follow along with it because you already know the story and I've read about it and I'd seen
Right.
the 70s film. When you're watching the 50s one, I don't think it's actually that clear exactly what the pods are doing. And I don't know whether that was actually intentional, whether they left it so that it was a little bit you're a little bit
Right.
in the dark about what this alien life form is and what it's actually doing. It might have been intentional, but there's a point where I was like, it's not really that obvious at first. I didn't think that
Mm,
the pods erase your body once they've kind of latched onto you and you're asleep, and then it's kind of erasing you. Once it does the copy, I think
yeah.
it's more obvious when you've seen the remake and then watch this
Right.
one back. If you'd watched it, I could imagine the first time people watch that one being like, "Wait, what? What are they
Yeah.
doing? Sorry, what's happening there?"
Right, and, like you said, that may have been an intentional choice because it builds more the paranoia where you don't really know what exactly they're doing, you just know something is off,
Yeah, yeah,
with the film, but yeah, no, that I agree, I think the 78 does a better job at least explaining that, just because I think the focus is takes the same story but changes the focus. And that's to me, I think that's a really good idea for a remake. I think that's one really effective way to do a remake is tell the same story, but focus on something different thematically,
yeah,
where the audience can still see the
yeah,
blueprint of the original. They can still see it there, the story, the structure and
yeah,
everything, but there's a different meaning to it. There's a different focus to it. And
yeah,
I just think that it was a really smart way by Philip Kaufman and the writers and stuff who made the remake to do not try to carbon copy the original, but tell that same story in a different way,
yeah,
where it still feels like the original story, but it with a different focus. And I just think that's, if you're going to do a remake, that's a really effective way to do it.
Yeah. I think there's a lot you could do with this one as well. Like,
Yeah.
because these films obviously at the core were kind of commenting on themes and, things in the social consciousness at the time.
Right.
Because things have obviously changed a lot since the 50s, since the 70s, there's a lot you could do with that. Like that as a base concept about this alien invasion and the
Yeah.
replication and stuff. And then like, there's a lot of places you could actually really go with that. It's
Right.
interesting actually. I don't know if you have it. I'm trying to think if it's in the US, but there's a series we have here called Black Mirror. Have you heard of Black Mirror?
I have not. No.
You not heard of it? It's kind of a bit like a Twilight Zone in a sense. It's like a sci-fi. It was a short sci-fi series, and
Okay.
it's like an anthology. Where each episode
Yeah.
is its own little mini story. And
Gotcha.
yeah, again, Invasion of the Body Snatchers would fit really well into that because it's one of those kind of stories where it's something to do with technology or something futuristic in a way, or something that's happened, a sci-fi idea that's happened, and it's really
Yeah.
devastated people. And it's kind of a lot of a commentary on how people would react to it. Kind of these ideas of control and all this kind of stuff. And like it would work really well as that. So I think looking at something like Black Mirror and like what they've managed to do with like commenting on like the social themes of the time, I do actually think an Invasion of the Body Snatchers remake is
Mhm.
something that genuinely could work. When I
Yeah.
see stuff like that and how good that is, I'm like, oh, they could do that now. They could
Right.
actually do that.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's definitely, it's malleable. You can definitely do a number of different iterations of it and kind of play with it a little bit. Um, which so overall, Jack, which of these two movies do you think was better? And you can judge it on any means you want. You could base it on which one you think is more rewatchable, which one you like more, whatever way you want to go with it. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
give us your rating for both and which one you would give the edge to overall.
So even though I have been very praiseworthy of the 50s film,
Mhm.
I think overall I would say that the 70s is better. I think it's left a bigger impact on me, and I think I'm more likely to go back to that in the future, to kind of look into further, to review and stuff like that. It's more one of those kind of movies I can imagine if I was talking about some like really interesting horrors from a time. That would be a movie that I'd have a lot to say on, I guess. So I think
Yeah.
I think I'd probably just about give the edge, but I can't remember if we said this during the stream when it was live or before. But I think you were right when you said the 70s has higher highs and lower lows,
Yeah.
whereas the 50s is actually a more consistent film overall. Like it's difficult to actually, there's nothing really wrong with the 50s one, to be honest. I don't
Right.
actually think there's anything obvious to actually criticize about it. But I think the final half an hour and what the build has led to in the 70s one
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really good. And I do think it's quite genuinely quite scary.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think the final scene, even though sadly it was spoiled, I do think is a great scene.
Yeah.
So I gave both of them. I rate them also. I rate all my movies on Letterbox. I
Mhm.
gave both of them a 4 out of 5.
Okay.
So they are close. They are close. I love both. I think they're both very good. But I could see in the future, I could imagine the 78 one going up. Whereas I think the 50s one, that's where I'm at with it. I
Right.
think that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
What about
No,
you?
I love that you said that. I also have both of them as a 4 out of 5. Both are great films, and I actually would agree basically exactly with what you said. I would give the slight edge to the 78 overall, just because of the impact that it has when you watch it and the fact that sticks with me more. It hits harder. I think it ends more in a horror way than the original does. And that, for me, the horror effect is always going to be a big criteria with horror films. I want that horror effect to be there in a horror film. And I
Yeah.
think, not saying that Invasion, that the original isn't scary. I think psychologically the original can be definitely frightening, just with how it messes with you, paranoia, with the paranoia stuff. But the execution, the direction of the 78 hits harder.
Yeah.
And I think that's what would give it the edge for me overall. But both are great films. Both would be a 4 out of 5 for me as well. So interesting that We both gave both films a 4. We both give a slight edge to the remake. Uh, I like that. I'm glad that you got both of these right, Jack. So we we
I know
have
we've
a
been quite agreeable so far. We're going to have an episode soon, aren't we? When we watch one, and we're going to
oh
be like,
yeah,
"No,
yeah.
no."
Right. Well, I think we agreed with the outcome of the Friday the 13th one. I think
We
we both
did. No,
preferred
we
the
agree with the
remake.
outcome, but I was a bit more forgiving of the original than you.
Yes. Yeah, we had different ratings, but the outcome was the same. Here, I think
Yeah,
it's interesting. Both we had the outcome and the rating is the
yeah.
same here, which is
I think
interesting.
this is probably one of those rarer occasions with remakes, though, where I imagine both films are probably well liked. Like, I don't
Yeah,
think people have. I don't know if anybody that I've never heard of somebody that has like where they love the remake and hate the original or vice
right,
versa. I haven't heard that like with other movies.
right.
I think the consensus is they're both well liked for their time and people kind of appreciate them in different ways.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
you know,
absolutely, and I think, like, some people I have no issue with someone that prefers the original over the remake here, like, I love the original, like, if someone said, "No, for me, it's the original," I'm like, "Cool, I'm fine with that." I actually when I went to the horror con back in March and got to meet Nick Castle, who, obviously was the original Michael Myers, they also had, what was his name? The gentleman who Thomas Lee Wallace, who was the production designer on Halloween. He also directed Halloween 3. He directed the It miniseries.
oh
And
yeah,
they had a panel with him and the other Halloween actors. And I got to, they had a panel and they had a Q&A time where you got to go up and ask the panel questions. So I went and not during my question, but during someone else's question, Tommy Lee Wallace actually stated that his favorite horror film of all time is the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers,
oh
1956 one.
wow,
So I was like,
wow,
that's pretty cool.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
I totally get like why someone would love that
yeah.
original film. It's a great film.
I mean,
Um,
incredibly creative for the time, like incredibly
yeah,
creative, so well done. Like again, you probably have a better point of reference than me because I know you've seen a lot more horror than I have from the 50s. So it's often interesting to kind of compare against other stuff that was coming out of the time, and it's often difficult to appreciate because obviously we're a little bit younger than a lot of these movies. So it's like to know how impactful they would have been at the
yeah,
time compared to what was coming out. I can imagine, say, someone watching that then and just being absolutely blown away by it.
right.
And I guess we're so spoiled these days with how many movies there are available to watch. It's like sci-fi concepts about aliens and mind control and all this
Yeah,
kind of stuff. It's like we've seen it a number of different ways now. So we have to kind of look
right.
back and appreciate it from that respect. But I can imagine someone watching it back then and that setting them
Interest.
on like a
Yeah.
filmmaking path, being like, damn, that's what a horror film and a sci-fi film should be.
Right. I think the other issue is that we've become so I guess overexposed to horror now. Like they've done everything. Like it's so hard now to find something in horror that hasn't been done before.
Yeah.
Where in the 50s there were quite frankly there's still a lot of new things to explore, a lot of things that hadn't been done
Yeah.
yet. But now it's just like the chances of seeing something that hasn't been done before is very, very slim.
I think this
So
is the thing. They say now like people aren't like filmmakers and people and writers aren't as creative now. But it does feel like so many things have been done. Like it's
right.
like to be original now is surely a much harder task than it
Yeah,
was in 1956. Like it just
for sure.
is.
Yeah,
Everything
100%.
has been done. To an
Yeah, so
extent.
you're limited as far as like what lane are you gonna go down to do something that's different? Those lanes are getting narrower and narrower by the year as more horror stuff comes out. So,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
you know,
absolutely. So I think that's the thing. I do think we can look at this now and say it is a very creative film at the time, but I do also think, say nowadays, uh, films have a hard time because
yeah,
to actually come up with truly new, truly inventive ideas.
right.
I think is quite difficult. But then I guess these people were pioneers at the time, like kind of including like political and like social commentary into horror
Yeah.
about alien invasion. Like what a great idea! Like in the
Oh
time
yeah.
that it came, like fantastic idea in film.
Yeah,
So they obviously were creative pioneers of the time as well. But yeah,
100%.
it feels like now it's hard because to come up with something truly original is just I could never even think of
Right.
something, you know, that doesn't not base on something that's already come out or been
Right.
done
They're
in some
like,
way.
even if you think it's a new idea, like chances are, like if you dig hard enough, it's
It's
likely to be like,
done. It's
okay, yeah,
there.
this has been done before. Yeah, by
Yeah, yeah.
someone.
I mean,
But
that's why I was so praiseworthy, and not to get too off topic, but like last year, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but Weapons. Did you see
no,
Weapons?
I need to see it. I keep meaning to see it. Yeah, I need to
I'd love
check
to
it out.
hear your thoughts on it because
Okay.
it's been a bit of a bit of a divisive film, a bit polarizing. But to me, that was quite good in terms of like originality. Like that, it
Okay.
doesn't feel like the sort of film that you get very often. Or you know, there's a few elements which have been taken, but it's pretty weird and it's pretty different. And that for me was like, oh, I liked that. I really
Yeah.
liked it because I felt like it was genuinely quite new and original from what we're used to expecting these days. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I've heard a lot of good things about it. So I did add it to my watch list.
Oh,
So
good, good. I've
yeah,
been
I
curious
need
to hear your thoughts on that
yeah,
one.
yeah. I'm interested to check it out. Jack's definitely seen a lot more of the newer horror films than I have. So I trust his judgment with newer horror. But
Most of the
there,
time. Most
you
of the
might,
time.
most of the time, except
Most
when
of
it comes to Hereditary.
yeah. Like, in the chat, tell us, is Hereditary a good film? You know I'm
Yeah,
right.
it's not. It's not. We all know that. But there you go, guys. That was Jack and I's discussion on Invasion of the Body Snatchers, original and remake. Let us know which one you prefer in the comment section. Which one do you like more? Have you seen both of these? I know Jason is saying he's not seen the original. So definitely check both of them out. Let us know which one you like more. Jack, do you have anything coming up on your channel that you want to tell us about?
Well, yeah, it's good. I have actually started doing a lot more filming at the moment, stuff I just haven't actually released yet. So
Okay.
I'm not really working on particular series at the moment. I've kind of just been filming reviews basically just for movies that I'm watching at the moment.
Gotcha.
Really. So I have a little
Okay.
bit less of a formula or something that I'm sort of doing particularly at the moment. I would like to start some series again as the year goes on, but at the moment, I have just a load of stuff filmed for just movies I've kind of been watching, just my thoughts
Nice.
on movies that came out some years ago, not necessarily just newer stuff, but a
Yeah.
lot of horror as always, and a bit of a mix, really. But yeah.
Sweet. All right. Well, yeah, guys, go check out Jack's channel. Give him a like, give him a sub. Jack and I will be doing more of these. Our next one, I'll go ahead and announce. We're going to do Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original versus the remake. That's going to be
It's gonna be
fun.
a
I
good
think
it's gonna
Jack
be
and
a
I
good
are going to have
discussion.
very different opinions on that one. Where we were pretty much in agreement on this one, it's not going to be the case with with the next one. So
That's gonna be
yeah,
fun.
if you're a Texas fan, if you're a TCM fan, definitely want to come kick it with us on the next one. Probably be was this April, maybe June-ish. I think it's
Great.
probably, I think when we were talking, that is
Yeah, yeah.
just as summer's kicking off, you know, the heat, you get that Texas
Feels right.
vibe. That yeah, yeah, it
Feels
feels
right.
right there in the summertime. So
It's the one horror.
uh,
It's like one of the few horror films that I always. It does make me think of summer. Like you look at
yes,
Texas, like the sweating heat, and
I
like
can't watch it in the winter. I just can't watch it
it's
in the
just
winter. It
wrong.
just
Just
doesn't, yeah,
wrong.
it doesn't feel right. Like I have to be sweating when I
Oh,
when I
absolutely.
watch that
I mean,
thing.
I love it because I love hot, sweaty weather, and in England you
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
get much of it. You get like 3 days of
Right.
that. So when I see that, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes me think of summer.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, guys. Well, that's gonna be a wrap for this one. Until next time, everybody, you know what it is. Kick it and rock on. Peace.